My name is Anne Marie Moore. I am COO here at Media Sonar. We are a digital risk assessment provider that is very much dedicated to the MSP space, particularly those serving the mid-market customer out there. We're going to take some time to chat with you. I'm joined with my colleague, Renier, and I'm going to let Renier do a little bit of an intro himself, but our topic today in terms of talking about the cybersecurity talent gap, we're going to talk a little bit even broader around just the general opportunities and obstacles out there for the folks who have joined us today as far as bringing that managed security service offering to your client base, depending on where you are in the journey. Renier's got just a tremendous amount of experience and expertise. He's founder and CEO of Cyber Warrior. We both thought it was a really great match for us to talk together about these opportunities on the topic of managed security, and particularly given his expertise, some of the insights for all of you today as it pertains to addressing the talent challenges that are out there. But again, as I mentioned, a little bit broader. My goal is at the end of the day, you've got some tangible nuggets. If you don't get those, you've at least got validation of some of the things that you already know and are tackling. Failing that, you at least still feel this was time well spent for all of us. But we really hope you have a sense of how to continue to open the door, if you haven't already, or advance that sales conversation that you have with your clients overall to get buy-in on managed security services and address some of your your talent questions that you have for yourselves and them. Renier, do you want to add anything before we get into the meat of this?
I look forward to a conversation. Just by way of introduction, my name is Renier Mokete. I'm the founder and CEO for Cyber Warrior, and we are a cybersecurity workforce development company. We train people across the U.S. and in Latin America, and then we put them generally working with security service providers that are trying to grow their cyber workforce. So look forward to a conversation. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about why we are here. And Renier, I'm going to ask you to just set the stage here. We've got just some stats, but let's talk to this group about kind of why we think we're here today.
Well, I mean, if you're on the call, it's because you understand the challenge. Yet I do think that it's always important to level set. The reality is that there are $19 million per minute being lost to cybercrime. It is the greatest transfer of wealth in the history of mankind, and currently represents a bigger illicit market than all the legal drug trade combined. It's real. And it's an issue that's affecting all our customers. And it's not only a financial issue, it's a reputational issue in terms of you've spent a lifetime building a brand, yet at the same time, there are things that folks use against you in order to say, hey, I want you to give me $10 million or I'm going to release your privileged information. If you're in your industry, for example, which carries some very, very significant fines for each record that's being lost. Or if, for example, you're even small trucking company, somebody breaches your network and you are in the midst of getting an invoice being processed by one of your clients. Now wire transfer goes to a different bank account. You're stuck in the middle of it. Your insurance certainly won't cover that, and your customer won't cover it. And so there's a series of examples after examples of why this is important and why we're seeing small businesses, as obviously the large ones as well, taking cybersecurity very seriously.
So that kind of, that sets the stage of kind of the magnitude. And I think we, to your point, we know why we're here because of that. The things that we want to just chat and try and touch on a little bit is the opportunity is huge then in terms of countering that, addressing that, doing the, equipping your clients from a security perspective to, if not prevent, mitigate, and even before that, be aware of the risk that's out there for them. And I would think that for anybody on this call, you're probably trying to answer at least one of these three questions, depending on where you're at the journey in terms of your managed security offering. For some folks who aren't necessarily are there yet and or are dabbling or just building it, you're still trying to do a little bit of the where do we start question, like, okay, it's great, we have to tackle, there's lots of things we can do, where do we start? Second one is, okay, great, figure that out, how are we getting there? And that again has a lot to do, as we talk about related to the topic, the talent factor in terms of how do we address it, how do we get there. But probably also, I would think, you've got this great plan, you know what you're going to do, you started to offer it out to the clients. There's still that challenge and the struggle in terms of, okay, getting buy-in in terms of investing in what you have to offer. But no matter what, that opportunity is there in terms of that whole cybersecurity market opportunity and growth that they are projecting in the coming years. So I'm going to just segue into it, that we're going to just lightly touch on this, but it's kind of hard to just jump into the how do we get buy-in, how do we get there, without just at least touching on in terms of the where do we start. So if you're on this call and you are actually just starting to build out a managed security practice, and again, as I mentioned, some of these are nuggets, some of these are just validation, but it is pretty critical to begin with the business problem. Because one of the things that I think is a very challenging, particularly in client conversations, is money is very finite, and you got to be solving the right things. I can share very anecdotally, even just with Media Sonar, when we first embarked on the tech that we had started to build from a software perspective, it was pretty brand new. And a lot of the business case pieces of it, in terms of dealing with social, deep and dark web, and using that information to assess risk, to identify threats, et cetera, was very much a Wild West scenario. And when we first built the technology, we were competing in an audience that really didn't know what their actual problem particularly that they were solving was. And we ended up building within our product, when we first started out, you could just do anything with it, right? It was very, very quote unquote customizable. The challenge is then you're putting it in the hands of a market at that time that really didn't necessarily have all of the other expertise to say, okay, you've got this, I know exactly what to do with this, so here I go and build it. If I fast forward to today, what we've absolutely learned and where we are at in terms of the software services that we delivered is we actually worked hard to define the problem. Let's be really crisp on the problem that we're going to solve for the customers that we're going after. We're not going to solve everything, but really honing in and creating that niche approach and focusing on the business outcome made a huge difference in terms of the technology we invested to help build our software, the data providers that we helped build our software. So it's definitely an important aspect. And if you are talking to clients as far as trying to bring in your managed service offering to them, understanding again, and this is just validation, really though, clearly understanding what's the business problem that they care about the most related to what you're going to have to offer them, helps the conversation move along a lot easier. So you move beyond that, and then you get into the, okay, so that's great. How do we get there? And I'm going to turn it over to Renier to also to chat a little bit about what you see on the right-hand side of the screen, because no matter what, and again, every problem really should be looked at from a business perspective when it from this triangle, the people, the process, the technology triangle, and always within that triangle of how you're looking to mapping out how you're going to get there, assessing your viability to guide your decisions, always has the time, the urgency, and the money factor associated with it. And to lead into the topic today of, the people, process, technology, let's look at the people factor, that talent factor. And Renier, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about some of the things that folks should be taking away, considering, using to address the PPT triangle in terms of building out their managed security practice and moving into that buy-in conversation with their customer.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Anne Marie. And one of the things that I wanted to add relative to the initial point that you made around beginning with the business problem, I think it's important to bring it down to the customer, right? And communicate, quote unquote, in English in terms of what is the business challenge, and providing those real world examples that are relevant to them. And there's so many case studies that are out there related to cybersecurity that I think things that resonate with people, as long as you are contextualizing things in a way that is immediately relevant to them and size appropriate, right? Many of the MSPs on the call are dealing with smaller businesses that have 10, 20, 30, 50 employees. And so you want to make sure that you identify what are the different things that are happening within their industry specifically, and the risks that are relevant to them, so that you can bring that home. Related to this challenge about people, which I think is the Achilles heel of cybersecurity. And if you look at the statistics, if you look at the initiatives coming out of the White House and that have been coming out of the federal government over the last decade, the focus is inevitably on the people side of it. And why is that? Well, the reality is that there are 4 million open jobs today, including 750,000 open cybersecurity jobs within the United States. And so even if you have all the fancy widgets in the world, even if you've got a lot of buying power, we've seen a number of customers that invest heavily in hardware and software, but then don't have the right human capital to administer that technology. And I think that that's where MSPs become extremely valuable, in that you can help to package not only the people aspect of it, but also the solution management, if you will. For us, the way that we've seen MSPs be successful is to understand their customer base relative to what type of talent their customer needs to be supported by. There's some clients, for example, that are in the defense space. And so those clients need people that are security clearances more often than not, that have a military background. And so if that's your client base, then great. How are you building a workforce that allows you to tap into that talent? At the same time, if you've got other types of customers that perhaps don't have a federal regulation that they need to abide by relative to where people are located, then there's a lot of cost advantages related to things like offshoring, for example. And that's one of the things. I'm actually in the Caribbean right now for a conference, and we're seeing companies of all shapes and sizes that are trying to figure out how do they reduce their cost. And these are primarily service providers that are trying to figure out how do they compete with the onset of not only advancements in technology, but also globalization. If people can work from anywhere from home, that mean to your cost factors as you look to deliver services? And what does that mean to the expectations of your clients relative to the costs that they're looking to deploy? And they think about, okay, well, I'm getting a call from a service provider who sent a quote over, and their price is 60% of what my local MSP is quoting. How is that? How are they able to do that? Usually it's globalization. And so one of the things that we're seeing a lot and having a lot of conversations with folks is how do they enable hybrid workforce that goes with people that need to be on site, that need to be in front of the, coupled with folks that are perhaps on the back end doing support for the client and helping to keep costs down, which obviously for small businesses is always paramount.
Okay. So if we move on related to, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the other piece that I just wanted to end in on that. So we talked about the people part, right? And I think that one of the things that I like to emphasize on is the order of things, people and technology in that order. I focused on the people because at the end of the day, without the right human capital, it is quite difficult for you to build the right processes. And ultimately, when you do bring in technology, it's technology that is looking to automate a flawed process. And you're simply getting into a best thing you had. And you also create a false sense of security. Um, and so this is where you now begin to say, yep, I've got the right talent in place for my customer. And how do the processes and ultimately the technology that empower and enable me to scale my service offering, how do those things come together?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask a couple questions actually at the end too for the audience that came in related to this, because I think it's really important to understand where folks are at related to that being a challenge in terms of what they're doing and within their service offering to their clients in terms of that finding the talent, where they're getting the talent, and kind of what your talent challenges are. When we move though in terms of moving forward on this whole the what's stopping you as far as a managed security, either building the practice or getting your clients to buy managed security from you. There's the other part of it in terms of the getting the buy-in, and there's always going to be your objections. And I've got just a couple in here, like, well, breaches are less likely to happen to my organization because I'm small or because of the business that I'm in, the industry, et cetera. We'll take our chances. It's important, but we don't know exactly where or how much to invest to get meaningful ROI. So risk avoidance, not going to do anything about it. Or it's just plain old too expensive or expensive for our needs, can't afford it, period. And then also the flip side is that, you know what, I think for that aspect of what we do from a tech perspective, we're going to try to manage this in-house. I don't know if there's others. It'd be really, this would be a great way for people to interact here and just put it in the chat. There has to be lots of others, but those are oftentimes, I think, the conversations that people get into, particularly with SMB related to actually having managed security or security services or security, frankly, a security strategy, digital security strategy for their organization. So certainly welcome you to put some of those other objections you hear in the chat. In terms of that, what's stopping you and getting the buy-in, one of the things that we'd kind of want to chat with you all and leave with you is there is an opportunity in terms of opening the door there as far as getting buy-in is having that opportunity to show your customers where they're vulnerable. My guess is that a lot of the customers that you have today, you've probably got your core that they were your lifeblood starting out and building out your business. You got to know them very well. They're the ones you came in sometimes on the weekends because of things going wrong, burning midnight oil for. So they become more than customers. There's a lot of trust and there's a lot of pedigree in your relationship. And in terms of getting them to think beyond I'll take my chances, showing your customers where they are vulnerable is an opportunity to kind of open the door to the conversation that maybe we should do something about it. And I've just switched over here. So in terms of that, the conversation, and hopefully these are things that are good takeaways. They may be something that resonate already with what you're doing, but we all know about the risk of doing nothing. It's very easy to talk about that. Risk of doing nothing is we're going to get breached. There is some table stakes that are also growing out there. Renier talked a little bit about that in terms of when sometimes those things happen. Insurance. What are the insurance implications for you? There's compliance components that are creeping up everywhere. For all of us, regardless of the size, related to just being able to do business from a digital security perspective. There's also just your own customer base. Sometimes customers are sitting, their own customers are saying, you need to be doing these things for us to continue to do this, to continue to do business with you. In terms of showing them where they are vulnerable, it's kind of a bit of a process. It's like starting out with the educate. Okay, so Are you aware of all of these things? Also educating on how and where exposures actually happen out there. I think one of the things that I never assume is that is the internalization of everybody that the digital attack surface isn't just about the network anymore. It's everywhere your people, your assets touch and interact with on the internet. So if you look at that diagram on the side, that whole external attack surface is the playing ground for hackers, breaches, phishing, and a lot of it is about inadvertent exposures that are out there. They're not the things that organizations are necessarily wrapping their arms around. That education is super important, and just making sure, okay, do you know this? Are you aware? Is this of a concern? Okay, still not a concern for you? Check, let's move on. And the next aspect of that conversation then is okay, we're educated. Do I have an opportunity to show you, to demonstrate though what that exposure would be? And right now, I've got DRA, and DRA in this slide stands for Digital Risk Assessment. So Media Sonar as an offering does do digital risk assessments. This is a great door opener with customers that doesn't take a lot of effort and investment on their part. And just play it out in that conversation. Okay, it's out there. You're not necessarily concerned. Can we just run this digital risk assessment and just show you, give me a couple of, and maybe you're talking with the COO, or you're talking with the CIO, or you're talking with one of the, a decision maker. Let me just show you, based on your digital footprint, what is out there, right? With your permission, let's take a look at this. It's a simple, great door opener. It's very cost effective. And all they have to do is give you a couple of attributes. Let's say it's an email address, a phone number, first name, last name type of scenario. And you can actually demonstrate to them, okay, regardless of whether this is high risk, here's your exposure. And it just starts the conversation for other things. And what ends up happening is then you've got an opportunity to talk about the what ifs then. If this is out there, sure, perhaps it's not, you haven't been breached yet, or it's on a breach list, but it hasn't impacted your organization. Should we start to talk a little bit more then about the what if that remains out there and it is used? What's the financial impact to your organization? What are the things that we think we could help you do to mitigate it? That's a real simple one. If you are lucky enough to also have that conversation, maybe it's even more in depth, and it's can we try to do a vulnerability assessment overall? And maybe you as an MSP don't necessarily offer that today, but go out there and find a partner who does it, because it's an opportunity then for you to say, okay, this is what's out there. Here now are the things that we can do for you to help you protect on an ongoing basis.
And I would add to that, Anne-Marie, and I would remind people that all business is people to people. And so one of the great things that I think the tool does is that it really brings it home at an individual level, and it demonstrates what are the risks associated with this particular person, beyond whether or not their corporate email is out there. But if whether it's their cell phones, whether it's their personal Gmail accounts, whatever attack surface may be utilized by an attacker, social media, it up them. And what it does is that not only does it create personal risk for the individual, but anytime an individual is compromised, that creates risk for the business. And so I think it's important to understand that, and also communicate it to our customers. And some of these things seem to be obvious, but it's the most obvious things that we miss. And so making sure that we're providing that level of clarity for our customer, and that gentle reminder that the digital footprint of your employees as people, as individuals outside the company, is as much of a risk to you as your digital footprint from a corporate standpoint.
Yeah, no, those are great points. Great points. if I move on related to that too, is getting that opportunity. So let's play it out. You're able to, whether it's doing a vulnerability assessment, have that opportunity to use the DRA as a conversation starter, which, by the way, for a DRA, once you've done that, you can also continue to do that as part of that managed security offering for your client to kind of keep it keep a pulse and understand what's the changes in the exposures based on the changes that they have put into place. So it's a great also ongoing offering related to your engagement with the client. But in doing something, being able to do something like that, the next real opportunity in that conversation is to relate it. So as we all know, and again, some of these are so obvious, but being able to then share that industry or the customer relevant breaches, how they handle remediation, what they did differently moving forward, but also probably even more importantly, and I think this is a great takeaway, and it's actually really helped me in different conversations also with customers, is talking about managed security investment isn't just about the risk avoidance side of things. It's not just a cost. It's not just something we have to do. Because we have to protect our networks. It actually is an opportunity for the rest of their business, the rest of what they're doing in their business as well. And the opportunity is about better business effectiveness and possible acceleration. Because if you look at the bullets below there, whether they actually do have a remote workforce or hybrid workforce, whether because of the business that they're in, there's a real IoT factor in what they're actually doing, whether they're also they've started to work and run applications and build out from a cloud perspective, their supply chain, how complicated or how complex their supply chain is. All of those things are very, very, very much impacted by the digital exposure of your organization. And to be focused and have a managed security strategy that is trying to, as much as possible, understand the exposure, mitigate the exposure, and or act upon what happens as quickly as possible, becomes an enabler in these other areas. It's harder to play in these other areas. It's harder to have a remote worker if you just leave things undone when it comes to digital security or information security protection and managed security. I have shared for the audience here too. I talked about these digital risk assessments. This is just a real quick summary of what it does, but fundamentally, you really can take that person-to-person aspect of your conversation and literally do a corporate or a person asset or digital footprint risk assessment. It's kind of first level, identifies and summarizes digital risks, expose the online, the risk is scored. It provides remediation recommendations per the risk finding based on the score. Those are the categories that are covered in these DRAs. Have also given a link related to the info sheet here. But as already talked about, it's a great door opener with your clients. So we talked kind of lightly, broadly. Hopefully there's some takeaways related to what we touched on for this, as far as, starting with the problem, really doing that viability across your people, process, and technologies, and looking at everything through the lens of that. And then really, as far as getting that buy-in, at the end of the day, showing vulnerability is a great way, if you get that opportunity, to really start to build that buy-in conversation. And I think really importantly out of that too is that managed security strategy is not just a cost. It really is an acceleration or an effectiveness enabler for the business. Renier, I don't know if you have any other comments that you would want to leave with folks as well.
Well, I think that the last point is something that certainly resonates with me and something that I discuss frequently. at the end of the day, we're all trying to figure out how to grow our businesses faster. We're all trying out how to support our customers. And a lot of the conversations that are happening today are around the impact of artificial intelligence, for example, and automation. How do you
Yeah.
automate? And not just automate because you're looking to cut costs, but because you are looking to survive. It's just the way of the world. It's like 20 years ago, you're a small business and you're trying to figure out whether or not to roll out a corporate network and computers and things like that. That was a real thing, and we don't recognize that today. The question as to whether or not I need a computer network sounds like a ridiculous thing, but was it 20 years ago when we were running small businesses that had 10 employees, 15 employees? The answer is that maybe you had a couple of computers, but there were a lot of other things that were not as sophisticated as now is the standard. Now comes in artificial intelligence and call it Internet 2.0, right? And so I think it's really upon us to make sure that our clients and that our executives that we're supporting understand the business impact of technology and the fact that if they're looking to continue to grow their businesses, they're looking to continually improve the bottom line, then digitization is just one of those things that you just don't really have a choice about. And oh, by the way, the more you depend on technology, the more you're depending on safety in the technology stack. And so I think that putting it into that context is it's an important thing for us to pause and think about and make sure that we're also communicating whether it's us as a stakeholder within a company that we're supporting or it's us as a service provider that is trying to educate a customer on how they can leverage technology to improve business outcomes.
Yeah, that's a couple of great points in there. Thank you.
And I do see some questions that have
Yes, I
come
was
up.
just gonna, yeah, go ahead, Renia. I was gonna, can you see the question? So
Yeah,
I was gonna
do.
get you to address that first one from Chris.
Okay, yeah,
Fulmo.
no, happy to.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chris, thanks for the question was how do service providers continuously develop talent so that they can continue to grow their talent pipeline and therefore can continue to take in new talent and grow them? It's a great question. I thing I'll tell you is that you dig the well before you're thirsty. If you expect that you're going to go out there, you're going to put a job description and you're going to be inundated with qualified talent, not that you get 100 people responding, but that you get people that are qualified to do the job you need them to do. It's a different thing. And not only that you get people that are qualified to do the job, but let's be candid, that they are available at a price that you can afford. Because that's the other thing. There's always smart people that are available if you are Google and Microsoft and Facebook and you can throw all kinds of stock packages at them. But if you're a rich business, you're really looking to compete. And you're competing on more than money. You're competing on culture. And so how do people get to know the culture of your organization before they ever submit for a job application? And so that it's one of the tactics that we use and keep in mind, we have a learning platform, including gamified learning and other things. But as part of our own recruitment strategy, we're constantly putting out contests. We're doing that with schools, colleges, community colleges, and we're doing that in the market just for fun. And we create an ecosystem where folks that are junior and trying to get into the industry are getting familiar with us and what we do, and the fact that we have the vested interest of the community in mind and that we're supporting that community, that we're giving away prizes. And it could be something as I don't know, a drone or some other widget that people will enjoy. But what's the cost of hiring a recruiting company to find you that talent? And or what's the cost of you having a rec out for 6 months? And so you spend a little bit of money, you start building a brand organization as an employer that is constantly looking to grow and develop their people, and also as someone who's giving back to the community. And so I think that in addition to that, you should create spaces for your own employees to continuously receive training and not just going to a boot camp or going to a certification class, but rather giving them the opportunity to participate not only in conferences, but also encourage them to be active in local communities of cybersecurity enthusiasts and cybersecurity professionals, and also encouraging them to participate in things like hackathons and bug bounty programs and these other things that allow them to have fun, allow them to engage. And oh, by the way, if that needs to happen within business hours, then so be it. Encourage them, support them. More often than not, you'll find that employees that feel that they're in a position to grow and supported to grow are much more likely to stay than someone who's just being thrown money at them. And so that's how I would answer the question. I think that it's important that you create that community, both external and internal, as a key strategy for development. And please, please, please do not wait until you have a job role. You have to start doing it now.
That's actually, the last comment's actually really important for sure. We have time for, I think, one more, and I'm going to read it, and then Renier, I'm going to speak very specifically from my side of it, because I probably have a smaller lens, but I'd appreciate anything that you wanted to add. The question is, we've already managed to get initial buy-in from most of our clients and have been offering security services for a few years now. Now the problem we're facing is demonstrating the effectiveness of the security efforts we have in place. Do you have any suggestions for how we can show the value of our security services on an ongoing basis? Well, being the coming more from the software vendor side and the service that we offer, I can speak to it very specifically related to our DRA practice, providing, as an example, ongoing assessments over time to demonstrate, and sometimes it's that finding the needle in the haystack or avoiding the big, huge silver bullet versus everything's okay is also a very valid answer. So DRAs over time that demonstrate that things either have gotten better, have not changed, or and are being found and remediated is an effective tool. Getting it and being able to provide that and putting it in the drawer afterwards is, from the client's perspective, is that okay, we have done this, it's due diligence, we avoided significant changes in terms of high risk categories, is a measure of effectiveness at a very a simple level for the organization. Renier, I'll leave it to you related to more of the broader practice, if you had any thoughts on that one as well.
Yeah, I would extend that. One of the points you made around helping to measure risks. One of the things that we always recommend to service providers is that they provide quantitative risk scores for folks. Particularly leveraging frameworks like NIST. And here's your score out here, and maybe you're at a 1 or whatever. And over time, demonstrating how their scoring has improved. Moreover, as you present investment opportunities to your clients on the things that they should be looking at, demonstrate and highlight how that's going to lower their risk, right? You need to be able to translate risk into a cost so that folks understand how the investment is mitigating whatever potential exposure they would have. The other thing that I would recommend, particularly for those that are doing monitoring and managing your services, is that you be transparent with your customer. What's been happening in their network? What kind of attacks have you been finding on a daily basis?
Yeah,
They're getting attacked on a daily basis. Do they know that they're being attacked on a daily basis? And how are you sitting down with your customer to review those things? And I think that those QBRs, whether it's quarterly or monthly, are very important, at a minimum quarterly, because if you're just depending upon some email that a business owner is not going to read because they're busy with running their business, then you're going to be forgotten. And then when renewal time comes, they're looking at it and say, hey, is this a worthwhile investment? And the reality is that not only from the perspective of you as someone who's trying to sell a service, but you're also doing a disservice to your client by not communicating with them effectively. And in doing so, putting them in a situation where they're making a poor choice of stopping the investment. And so whatever attacks you're seeing across their surface, any phishing emails that you're preventing, incidents that you're responding to, all that needs to be packaged and communicated on a quarterly basis. And I would schedule a 1-hour meeting with your stakeholders and say, hey, here's what we did for you. And here's how we kept the enemy at the gates. And again, in English, but in a way that shows the numbers, the work that you're doing on a daily basis. We know how difficult it is. And I would also bring in the team, not just you at an executive level. I would bring in my engineer, who's the one who was doing threat hunting at 3 a.m, trying to identify this issue. Let the client know that we tracked it down, that this is the steps we took, and let them speak to the person that did that. And oh, by the way, if Johnny here wasn't out doing this work, who would have taken care of that for you? And I think it's important to do that. Cybersecurity is one of the most thankless jobs there is, yet it's on us to communicate its value.
Very, very well said. Okay, I think our time is up. I'm not seeing any more questions come in. I can't thank you, Renier, enough for joining us today, as everybody, I'm sure, appreciates as participated. He and Cyber Warrior, well, he particularly is a wealth of knowledge and I think great insight in the topic of MSPs and bringing a managed security practice to your clients. So thank you, Renier. And we've put some contact information as well in here. So please feel free to reach out if you either have any questions, would like more information, or if you got some more ideas related to some topics you'd like us to work on or share that would be of interest to you. Okay, so I want to thank you all for joining. Have a great rest of your day. Take care. Bye-bye.